Fortnite has had 30 different seasons spread across 5 different chapters, and while I truly do love every single chapter this game has to offer, not every chapter is created equal, and in this video we are going to rank every single chapter of Fortnite all the way from chapter 1 up to our current chapter, chapter 5. I actually put a decent amount of thought into this video, so if you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop if you would like to support the work that I do here on YouTube. And let's just get right into this. I got some spicy takes for you guys. At the number 5 spot on this list, what I believe to be the worst chapter of Fortnite is actually our current chapter, chapter 5. Now look, yes, we do have a small sample size of only 3 seasons, but is it really that small of a sample size? I mean, chapter 3 and 4 I think had, 4 and 5 seasons respectively, so it's really not that small of a sample size. And I think there are a few things that attribute to my thinking of chapter 5 being the worst chapter. And again, if chapter 5 is your favorite chapter and you're enjoying playing the game, that's amazing. Keep enjoying playing the game, and don't let my opinion sway your thoughts on the current state of the game, because I genuinely do love playing Fortnite and I play every chapter. But I think the launch of every single season of chapter 5 has brought this down for me. I mean, think about it. Chapter 5 season 1 was a pretty poor launch. Medallions were absolutely broken out of their mind. If you didn't have a medallion, you weren't winning the game, and at least for myself, that turned me away from playing the beginning of chapter 5. As well as this, Lego Fortnite was very bare bones, and of course I am mainly talking about the battle royale, but of course with the introduction of chapter 5 came all these new features. Rocket racing, to me, I think I played it one time, never played it again. And Fortnite Festival is cool, I will admit that, but it launched in a very kind of boring and lackluster state. But back to the battle royale, Oscar's Frenzy Auto Shotgun was just insane. The Reaper Sniper was absolutely insane. The launch of battle royale in chapter 5 was really poor. I think a lot of people were really excited, but I think after a week that excitement really slowed down. And the launch of season 2 was absolutely disastrous. I just talked about it in a recent video. This season launched at 10 p.m. at night, at least where I live. 10 p.m. they launched a season. It had an 18-hour downtime. The Thunderbolts of Zeus were absolutely broken and needed to be nerfed multiple times. And season 3 is honestly the biggest culprit of having a poor launch. I mean, we all know how this season launched, just an absolute disaster. And these poor launches really do shy players away. I mean, think about how bad like the first week or two of chapter 5 season 3 was. I mean, it is honestly the worst launch of a season I can think about since probably season X in chapter 1. The cars were the most egregiously broken things I have ever seen in a Fortnite season besides mechs, to be honest with you. Nitro was absolutely busted. You could just walk through anybody's walls, like literally just walk through their walls and you could do nothing about it. And it took a while for them to add stuff like the heavy impact sniper rifle, which is kind of a counter to cars if you want to think about it that way, or boogie bombs, stuff like that. And at that point, it was just too late for me. I think chapter 5 has kind of been on a downhill trend lately, and I'm hoping that the return of chapter 2 OG, if you want to think about it that way, as long as it's in chapter 5, is really going to help the case for this chapter. But in my opinion, I just have to put it as the worst. And at the number 4 spot on this list, that is going to be chapter 3. And I do have to preface before I start talking about chapter 3 that I barely played chapter 3 season 2, so I have no input on that season, but I've heard kind of mixed opinions on it. But what I will say is I feel like this chapter started off really strong and then just kept going downhill and losing momentum over time. I mean, think about chapter 3 season 1, the MK assault rifle, the Spider-Man web shooters, the Daily Bugle. I mean, chapter 3 season 1 brought a ton of new fun stuff. Except for the Stinger SMG, that thing was incredibly strong before it got nerfed. Even the MK was as well. But I feel like just in general of chapter 3, there's not many memorable moments here. Like, chapter 3 just feels like a bunch of kind of mid smashed together. Like, there's not a single season in this chapter that I would put at like an S tier in a tier list. Like, everything just feels so middle of the road here. And chapter 3 season 4 certainly does not help that case either, and it is actually one of the worst seasons of all time. That is the Chrome season, of course. And yeah, chapter 3 season 3 that was vibin' was pretty good. I don't have a ton of complaints there, but I do just think chapter 3 season 1 was the highlight of chapter 3, and then after that, it just kind of slowly went downhill. And like, again, while I'm recording this, I'm thinking about chapter 3, and there's just nothing that like sticks out to me as being amazing. I don't have any crazy memories from this chapter. It was just all okay. And I guess that's not a terrible thing, but not good enough to put it any higher on this list. It also did introduce the new movement, of course, with tack sprinting and sliding, so depending on how you like those, that could change your opinion on this chapter, but it really did change how Fortnite was played, and in my opinion, actually made the game a lot sweatier with all the new movement. But yeah, I just couldn't put it any higher on this list, to be honest with you. And at the number 3 spot, that is going to be chapter 4, and just hear me out on this because I know a lot of people love chapter 4. And in fact, I am one of those people. I wish that I could put chapter 4 higher because this chapter is criminally underrated and really, really good. And look, you gotta hear me out on this, right? Because chapter 4 season 1 was phenomenal. Chapter 4 season 2 I also believe was phenomenal, but chapter 4 season 3 just killed any momentum that this chapter had going for it. And the problem is, when you only have 4 or 5 seasons in a chapter, you cannot afford to have an absolute stinker season like this. In something like chapter 1 where you have 10 seasons, or chapter 2 where you have 8 seasons, you can afford to have a really bad season in there as long as you have a bunch of really good ones to make up for it. But when you only have 5 seasons, you can't afford to have one be this bad. And I will say Wilds, that is chapter 4 season 3, was almost as bad as chapter 2 season 6. I mean, if you watch my videos, you know how much I despise chapter 2 season 6, but honestly, Wilds is up there. And I feel like they regained slowly with chapter 4 season 4. I don't think that was the most popular season, but of course, this chapter gets a huge buff due to season OG. And I think chapter 4's numbers are kind of skewed in a way, especially towards the end because of season OG. I mean, if you put season OG in any chapter besides chapter 1, it would have been insanely popular still. But I can't hold that against chapter 4. Season OG was incredible and brought back so many players, broke player records. Everybody was finally playing Fortnite again, and it was really fun. And I just wish it was a little bit longer, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers, right? Chapter 4 season 1 was honestly incredible with the Thunder Shotgun and Shockwave Hammer meta, and chapter 4 season 2 followed suit with the Kinetic Blade and the Havoc Pump, 2 of honestly my favorite metas of all time, back to back. If it wasn't for chapter 4 season 3, this chapter would absolutely be higher up on this list. Also, I will just add a note here and at the end, chapter 4's map I think was kind of weak. I mean, the POIs, especially the new ones from chapter 4, I just don't remember at all, and I played a ton of this chapter. I just remember faulty splits, to be honest with you, and the Citadel. Everything else is just kind of wishy-washy in my brain, and I don't think they were that memorable. So yeah, that's kind of another point there at the end. Also, whatever happened to augments? I think augments were a great addition to the game, and they've been totally banished and just forgotten about. Alright, getting into the top 2 here, I think most people probably expected these 2 seasons to be here, but in what order, right? And I thought pretty hard about this decision, honestly, but I came to the conclusion that at my number 2 spot is going to be chapter 1. And that's honestly crazy to say because I never thought that anything would ever beat chapter 1. It was the prime of Fortnite, right? But as I look back on this chapter, I take off the nostalgia glasses, take off the rose tinted glasses. There were some glaring issues during this chapter, and it is really tough to compare, let's say, chapter 1 to chapter 5 because they were, what, 6 years apart. There's a ton of differences that happen in the gaming industry and just this game as a whole. But the first few seasons of chapter 1 were pretty bare bones. I mean, think about it. There was no playground mode, there was no creative mode, there was no vehicles until the first one, which was a shopping cart. There was no Fortnite festival, no rocket racing, no like lobby music, no like really any of it. It was just bare bones. And actually, I will say, I know a lot of people really honestly prefer that. I mean, just look at the item shop. Look how the item shop has changed from chapter 1 to chapter 5. We used to have like 8 items max in the item shop, and now you could literally scroll straight down for like 5 minutes. With that being said though, obviously chapter 1 has had some of the best seasons we've ever seen. Chapter 1 season 3, chapter 1 season 4, chapter 1 season 7, to be honest with you, really stick out as being top 10 seasons of all time. And I think you could honestly probably throw season 5 in there, although the balance was all out of whack, and that's the thing with having a newer game, trying to balance back and forth all the time, especially when you're just starting out and are new to the battle royale scene. But the one thing that chapter 1 absolutely had going for it was the constant updates. I mean, for the first honestly 7-8 seasons, I would say, there was basically an update every single week. And this chapter added some of the most important things ever to Fortnite. Creative was added in season 7, reboot vans and reboot cards were added in season 8. And honestly, most of the stuff that you love today in Fortnite is because because of the foundation that was built in chapter 1. But there are some things that really hold back this chapter, especially the way it ended Season X. To put it bluntly, Season X was horrifying. The fact that mechs even made it past testing and they thought that this would be okay to be in a Fortnite season is just unfathomable to me. And this season was just absolutely a disaster, and even if you go a season back to Season 9, I think that was probably one of the more less popular seasons that we've ever had. Even for me personally, I did not like Season 6 at all really either. I think the thing with Chapter 1 is that the highs were really high and the lows were really low. Again, I'm really trying my best to keep the nostalgia out of this, because if I was just looking at it with nostalgia, this was my favorite chapter to play. But looking at it objectively, I think there is a chapter that beats it out. And at the number 1 spot, I believe the best chapter in Fortnite history is Chapter 2. I think that Chapter 2 basically just capitalized on all the mistakes of Chapter 1. And you have to understand, this is the first time that we got a new map. Now it's customary, right? We get a new chapter, oh look, great, a new map is coming out. But this was not how it was after Season X. It was like an absolute frenzy. Leakers were leaking all the new POI names. Everyone was wondering what the new map would look like, what new features we would get. And honestly, it's so funny looking back on it now, because you should have seen how excited people were for the bandage bazooka and the ability to carry people on your back. The black hole event created so much excitement, and while Chapter 2 Season 1 delivered on that for about a couple weeks, it really slowed down with no updates in Chapter 2 Season 1 besides the harpoon gun. But I believe Chapter 2 Season 2 is the best season of all time. Of course, that is personal opinion. And Chapter 2 does have a little extra going for it because, as you know, I can't really say specifically, but stuff was going on in the world that made it so that everybody was just at home playing video games all day. And that gave a significant boost to the amount of players that were playing Chapter 2 Season 2, and honestly is probably the reason why people regard it so highly, because everybody played it so long. Obviously, the weapon balancing was all out of whack, but it is the first time we saw mythics, and I loved it so much. It is my favorite season. I think Chapter 2 Season 3 is an absolute strong season as well, and they came back even better with Chapter 2 Season 4, in my opinion, a top 5 season of all time. And you know, I think you'll see as we keep going through Chapter 2 that the big thing is this chapter had something that everybody could enjoy. If you wanted fun, goofy, honestly non-competitive gameplay, go to Chapter 2 Season 7 with aliens and UFOs and rail guns and laser guns, and you could have an absolute blast. But if you wanted a very tame, good, competitive environment, go to Chapter 2 Season 1 with a great meta. Or if you wanted an all collab season with some of the best superhero skins and most popular superheroes of all time, you could have that as well. I think Chapter 2 Season 5 was kind of mid, and we have to talk about the elephant in the room here, Chapter 2 Season 6. While yes, I am putting Chapter 2 as my favorite chapter, this is my least favorite season of all time. It was an absolute horrible idea. I understand what they were trying to do, because the next season after they went to the future, right, with aliens and stuff, and I will try my best to hold back and not absolutely rip into this season, because I feel like I do it every single video. But this was a real low point for Chapter 2, and honestly a real low point for Fortnite. Honestly, the biggest low point probably since Season X. Of course, as I previously mentioned, Chapter 2 Season 7 was incredible in my opinion, and I think really underrated. I think this is a great season of Fortnite. And Chapter 2 Season 8 is kind of a toss-up. I didn't play it a ton, but from what I've heard, another mixed bag. I think some people liked it, some people didn't. Probably more on the didn't than the did side. And honestly, I think that you could have put Chapter 1 here if you really wanted to and make a great argument for it. Honestly, they are so close, and it really does come down to personal opinion that they could flip-flop back and forth. But in my opinion, Chapter 2 just did such a great job with regaining after a bad season, and there really wasn't a stretch of more than one season where the game felt lackluster and boring. I feel like this was a really popular chapter, and there's no surprise why they're bringing it back as kind of an OG like we saw with Season OG. It's a great chapter, and I think it's the best. If you guys enjoyed this video, it took me a while to make, so be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know your guys' rankings. What do you guys think is the worst chapter of all time? What do you think is the best chapter of all time? I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. And of course, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.